for you all, yeah? This is what a typical 3D data capture session encapsulates. The patient comes in, you convince them to strip one way or the other, you start palpating them at certain points of the body, you start making little crosses where the markers should come, and you end up with a patient with a whole bunch of markers on their body. This is what the raw data looks like. You have a patient with a lot of red dots on them. Because in our lab, we don't just do barefoot, we also do operations or analysis with shoes and with orthoses. So everything adds up. The first session takes the longest, it's 50 minutes. Then every session that you add on takes about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how compliant and how weak or how strong the patient is. Then the patient goes away, my job starts. I start doing the labeling, the eventing, the modeling, looking at the reports, making sure there are no artifacts, yeah, and basically ensuring the quality of the data. On a very good day, I'm being very optimistic now, it takes 15 minutes. It can take even up to an hour if I use the multi-segment foot model on a foot that's maybe 6 inches big, and then I have a lot of ghost markers, a lot of crisscrossing of markers. It depends. The drawbacks of marker-based clinical gait analysis: it takes time. You cannot circumvent this problem. You have to go and do the nitty-gritty and stick the markers on the subject. So when you have patients who are physically weak, they're very young, they're less than maybe 5, 6, 7 years old, they're non-compliant simply because they're cognitively not fit, you can't really work that long with this subject. You have the problem of skin artifacts because the markers are moving on the skin as you move, and you're trying to capture the movement of the bone below the skin. Markers can get lost either because of the way the patient moves or because markers fall off. And then you have a very big problem because of marker misplacement. So if you misplace a marker, you put it on the wrong position, you can miscalculate the joint center, and then you can misrepresent the gait pattern. You can present this rubbish data to your boss and say, hey, this is my data, and then he can start making decisions based on your data. You have to be careful. What if a patient came in, just like the one you see right now, no markers, but you end up with a report that looks very similar to a marker-based report? Here we enter into the world of Thea 3D. Thea 3D is a markerless system. I'm going to focus only on Thea 3D, but it can be any generic markerless system that you talk about. They all work more or less on the same principle of object recognition. So they use neural networks. Every camera is used to extract a certain number of anatomical features. I've written 81 here, but 81 is actually now wrong. It's become 108 or 105 in the meanwhile because of the software updates. And all these features are then reconstructed in 3D. Yeah, I'm just going to skip over the research. If you guys want to have a look at the research, I can share the papers with you afterwards. What was very important for the research from the past from the past 3 or 4 years is that almost none of these papers published the segment of the pelvis. And why? Because it wasn't good data. And how do we know this? Because we tried it ourselves and we saw that the data wasn't good. So this is something that I'm not a big fan of. I prefer the path of being transparent and showing your data rather than hiding your data when it doesn't look nice. More of the research. We did a study in the GAIT lab in the hospital. So I basically begged qualists to leave their markerless system with me for a couple of weeks. It ended up to be a month. And I piggybacked the qualists. So basically what you've seen today in the lab, we did it for 1 month in my lab in the hospital. Yeah, and this is the setup. Same thing what you've seen so far. We had a total of 46 subjects. We synchronized both the systems, and we ran 8 GAIT trials per subject. We did a little bit of statistics, a little bit of analysis. The camera setup was very similar to what Mayuri had in the lab right now. And you've seen this as well. So these are all the marker-based 2D cameras. These are my video overlay cameras, also of the marker-based system. And these are the markerless 2D cameras. And you can see the very obvious difference. One has the video and one is black because you have only the markers. That's my daughter sitting there, one of my subjects. We stuck 3 models, so 3 marker-based models on each patient at the same time. So we had the CAST, which is the cluster-based. We had the Leardini model and the CGM. We ended up having 12 subjects and 34 patients. I'll slow down a little bit now because it's important for you guys to have a look so that you know what this data can look like. So if ever you walk out into this world and you're confronted with somebody talking about markerless with a lot of authority and confidence, you know where the advantages are and where the drawbacks are. In green, you have the marker-based data, yeah? And in purple, it's the marker-less data. So you see in the first thing, I have my pelvic tilt. You can see a slight shift of the data, yeah, towards more posterior. Doesn't matter. I couldn't care less. If you're telling me a subject has 10 degrees of pelvic anterior tilt or the other subject has 7 degrees, it matters not. I can even offset my markers a little bit and have this shift that I introduce as a mistake in the model itself. So the shift that I have in the pelvis, it goes down into the hip, right? So if I have more posterior or more anterior tilt, then I happen to have more extension or more flexion. The knee curve, I don't know if I have a laser. Where's the laser? This one? This one. So, my knee curves, they look pretty good. Would you all agree with me? Yeah, what about the ankle dorsiflexion? Yeah, a little bit off at the points of push off, but then again, are we really going into so much of detail? And something is happening on my screen, I'll make it goes away. The frontal plane, we see some slight differences. To be honest, I was really impressed that the foot and the ankle, where I expected the biggest of my problems with the markerless, it looked pretty okay. My biggest problem right now is here. Yeah? So when I walk in the hip internal rotation, I expect that a person, it doesn't matter whether you're male, female, boy, girl, that you have some slight hip internal rotation in mid-stance to terminal stance. Can you see what the markerless data is doing? It's fixating it on almost 0 degrees to -5 degrees throughout the entire GAIT cycle. The reason why we're doing 3D marker-based or markerless, it doesn't matter, but 3D motion analysis in the first place is to look at this plane. Yeah, we don't always have to agree on a lot of things, but if I see a patient walking with crouch gait, I know for a fact that this person has too much knee flexion in the stance phase. I don't need to have some fancy $1 million setup to tell me that, right? But what I want to know and what I want to inform my boss or the orthopedic surgeon is to tell him if this person is actually derotated and by how much he should be derotated then during surgery. Is my question answered here? Not really, right? The kinetics, the comparisons are pretty good. One thing that stands out is wherever you have peaks, you have differences or discrepancies between the markerless and the marker-based. But then again, I'm pretty happy with the data. I have a case study for you all. The video didn't work, unfortunately, so I've already thrown it out. But this is a subject who has hereditary motor sensor neuropathy. He was operated on the left, no, he's operated on the right side, that's correct. I can see the scars from here. And on the left side, you can see he has a drop foot. So he has an initial contact with too much plantar flexion, and I can see that very nicely in the graphs here, okay? In the swing phase, again on the left side, can you see what he's doing to accommodate for the drop foot? His leg is completely circumvented, and I see that with this massive hip external rotation. Again, only on the left side. We'll focus primarily on only these two graphs. I have my marker-based kinematics on your left side and the marker-less kinematics on my right side. It's very important to see that all these gray bands here are the normative data, and the normative data I've collected with the marker-based on this side and with the markerless on the right side. Yeah. Again, coming back to my original philosophy, compare apples and apples, pears and pears, but don't mismatch the other. So what is important right now to see is if I end up with the same interpretation of my patient with the marker-based and with the markerless. I don't really care about the ±5 degrees. That's not what this is about, because even models by themselves have their own inherent problems. Look at the pelvic anterior tilt. This patient has way too much posterior tilt. Can you see that? What a big offset, what a big shift I have here. What about here? Slightly below the norm, but not quite. I wouldn't even mark this as being pathological, to be honest. What about my hip flexion, hip extension? He has way too much hip extension, right? Over the entire gait cycle. And here he fits really nice into my normative band. He has knee extension on the right side. It's very well reproduced with markerless. So I'm happy about that. The drop foot that I have on the left side is also seen in the markerless data. All good. The problem here, the external hip rotation that I had in the swing phase as compensation for my drop foot, do I have it in the markerless data? No. I have to be honest, I picked out the worst case. But what happens if this patient comes in with the worst case and I base my interpretation based on data that is incorrect? I'm only presenting to you what is possible and what is not possible with the markerless data. So if you have to go over a little table and compare them, preparation time, marker-based, big headache. Markerless data is wonderful. Patient comes in, just get them to walk and you get your curves, right? The problem with skin artifacts, we have that in marker-based. With the markerless system, it's still not proven. There's still research going on to see whether I can actually induce skin artifacts. You can lose markers can get hidden, and this problem is solved with markerless systems. One problem that we have that is very, very poignant with markerless is the amount of data that we generate. I got a call actually from IT during this 4 weeks, and they asked me what was going on. They said, you're filling up our servers and it's costing too much money to save your data. Is something happening? And that's when I realized, I went into each patient and realized I was generating at least 1 terabyte for just these few trials of data. That is a lot of data for a hospital like ours, where everything costs money to save and archive. It's a very, very expensive business. And I can't overcome, and no one has given me a good idea or a good solution. There are some labs who delete some of the data, so they keep only 1 trial to represent a patient. But then what happens if I get a software update in 3 years and I want to reprocess my data? I can't do it because I deleted all my video files, right? So that's a big problem. The processing time also is quite high. And I can't do a fast track report during my 3D analysis, which is what is part of our standard procedure at the moment. I have to make sure that my data is okay before the patient leaves the lab, and I cannot do this with the markerless system. So the problem of quality assurance then is a very huge issue. Are we there yet? This is the question I always leave for the audience. I cannot answer this question for you. I can only say it depends really on what your application is and why you want to use a markerless system. There are labs right now in Europe who are buying only markerless system. A very good colleague of mine bought a new lab in a new hospital, and they have only markerless. They are well aware of the pitfalls, especially in the transverse plane, but then they use it for other reasons. And if you're sure, if you know what you're using it for, I would say go for it. But if you're unsure, if you're just buying the system and then leaving up to some kind of staff who are not really trained in motion capture analysis in the first place, then I would say that you should exercise caution. We actually published a nice paper about the comparisons, and it's just got out a couple of months ago. And